The most dangerous sign in a person, according to Carl Jung. The most dangerous of all delusions is when a man deceives himself. Carl Jung. In a world where appearances can be deceiving and perfection can be a mask, this one subtle sign may reveal more than 1,000 words ever could. In today's video on spiritual wisdom, we'll explore Jung's powerful insight into how to recognize the most dangerous type of person. Not the loud, aggressive ones, but the ones who seem flawless on the surface. What if danger hides behind a smile that never falters? As you listen, ask yourself, have you ever sensed something was off about someone who seemed too perfect? Share your thoughts in the comments, and let's dive deeper into the hidden layers of human nature. 1. The most dangerous people aren't outwardly aggressive, but those who seem too perfect. The most dangerous people are rarely the ones who shout, rage, or wear their flaws on their sleeves. According to Carl Jung, the real threat often lies in those who appear flawless, unshakably calm, endlessly polite, and almost unnaturally kind. These are the ones who smile at the right time, speak gently, never raise their voice, and yet something deep within you quietly recoils. It's not their goodness that alarms you. It's the absence of any visible struggle, any raw humanity. Your soul senses it before your mind can explain it, because what you're witnessing isn't true peace, it's suppression. Jung warned us that a person who hasn't faced their shadow is far more dangerous than one who has. When someone refuses to confront the darker parts of their psyche, the envy, rage, insecurity, shame, those disowned parts don't vanish. They grow in the dark, unacknowledged, until they slip out in twisted, often unconscious ways. These individuals are not harmless just because they are soft-spoken. In fact, their polished exterior can be the perfect disguise for internal chaos. They may be incapable of emotional intimacy, intolerant of imperfection, or subtly manipulative in their relationships, not because they're evil, but because they're blind to the parts of themselves they've exiled. A man who's never wrestled with his soul will project his darkness onto others. He'll villainize what he can't accept within. Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." When someone has buried their inner conflicts so deeply that they no longer recognize them, they become unpredictable, not just to others, but to themselves. That's why they're dangerous, not because they're calculating, but because they're asleep to the very forces that drive them. And the scariest thing is, they often believe they are good. They believe they are selfless, loving, spiritual even, but their goodness is built on denial, not integration. They haven't transformed their darkness. They've avoided it. And that avoidance is what makes them unsafe. Because when the storm finally breaks through the polished mask, it does so violently, without warning or control. It leaks out in self-righteous judgment, passive-aggressive behavior, cold withdrawal, or quiet sabotage. But the soul, your soul, always knows. It picks up on the emotional deadness beneath the perfection, the hollowness behind the smile. And when it does, you must listen. Don't doubt your discomfort. That instinct is wisdom. It's your soul keeping you safe from someone whose own soul has been buried beneath layers of performance. Jung wasn't just offering psychological insight, he was offering spiritual protection. The path to true wholeness is not about looking perfect. It's about becoming honest. The man who's walked through the fire of his own shadow becomes grounded, present, deeply human. He has nothing to prove, no mask to maintain. His soul radiates through his flaws, not despite them. He's not dangerous because he's real, and real life is safe. In a world that praises appearances, remember, true power comes from integration, not illusion. The ones who seem too perfect have not yet met their own soul, and until they do, they are not who they appear to be. Are you ready to trust your intuition and see beyond the mask? If so, comment below. I trust my gut to affirm your commitment to spiritual awareness and self-protection. 2. Carl Jung warns us about those who deny their shadow. Carl Jung warned that the most dangerous people are not those who are openly cruel, but those who deny the existence of their own darkness. The shadow, as Jung called it, contains not only our suppressed rage, jealousy, and selfishness, but also our repressed passion, power, and truth. Those who reject this shadow often build a persona, a false identity of politeness, kindness, and moral superiority, and mistake it for their true self. But this illusion is a trap. The more they cling to it, the more disconnected they become from reality, and the more harm they unconsciously cause. These individuals believe they are purely good, but that belief blinds them to their own toxic behaviors. They smile when they're angry, manipulate while claiming innocence, and judge others harshly without ever acknowledging their own flaws. They become masters of image management, not integrity. The danger lies in their unconsciousness. They aren't aware that their unacknowledged darkness is still acting through passive aggression, emotional guilt-tripping, silent resentment, and covert control. You might know someone like this, the coworker who's always cheerful, yet somehow makes the room tense, the friend who never argues but constantly plays the victim, the partner who says they love peace but avoids every difficult conversation. On the surface, they appear calm, composed, even saintly. But underneath, there's a storm of emotion they've never dared to face. And because they won't face it, they make others carry it for them. Carl Jung believed this disconnection from the shadow is not only psychologically unhealthy, but spiritually dangerous. When we suppress our darkness, it doesn't go away. It becomes projected onto others. The more someone tries to be all good, the more they unconsciously make others all bad. This split is what creates spiritual distortion, where love becomes control, morality becomes manipulation, and kindness becomes performance. These people don't just lie to others, they lie to themselves. And in doing so, they create an environment where no one is allowed to be real. Jung taught that the soul doesn't grow through perfection, but through integration. Only when you acknowledge your own capacity for anger, selfishness, or envy can you truly choose not to act from it. True strength is not the absence of shadow. It's the ability to hold your shadow without letting it rule you. People who have done this inner work are usually more grounded, humble, and trustworthy. They won't claim to be perfect, but they won't harm you to protect an image either. They've faced their inner demons, and as a result, they can love more deeply, listen more fully, and respond more authentically. So when you meet someone who seems too perfect, pay attention. Do they ever admit fault? Do they reflect on their triggers? Do they take responsibility when things go wrong? Or do they always present themselves as calm and righteous while conflict swirls around them? The answer will tell you whether they are whole or dangerously fragmented. Carl Jung's wisdom invites us to become spiritually mature, not by denying our flaws, but by owning them with courage and grace. The real danger isn't in people who show their mess, but in those who insist they have none. The soul doesn't evolve through performance. It evolves through honesty. The value of this truth is simple yet powerful. Never confuse appearance with authenticity. Trust the person who admits they're human, not the one who insists they're above it. Comment below, "I embrace my shadow," if you're ready to break the mask and step into your full, authentic self. 3. The more disconnected a person is from their shadow, the more it controls them unconsciously. The more disconnected someone is from their shadow, the more control it has over them, and they don't even know it. Carl Jung once said, "What you do not make conscious will be lived out as fate." And this truth echoes loudly in the lives of those who appear most flawless on the surface. These are not the obviously cruel or loud individuals. In fact, they are often soft-spoken, charming, spiritual in language, and measured in tone. But beneath that polished exterior is a soul that has never dared to face its inner darkness. Their kindness feels rehearsed, their love conditional, and their morality laced with control. They project their unhealed wounds onto others and call it care. They manipulate but call it guidance. They judge harshly but say it's for your own good. And because they genuinely believe this story, they never question their actions. That is what makes them so spiritually dangerous, not their anger or aggression, but their denial. You will feel it in your gut, even when everything looks perfect on the outside. There's a dissonance, a tension, a spiritual disconnection behind their smiles. These people moralize without compassion, preach without reflection, and advise without looking within. They may speak of light, but they've never walked through their own darkness. They are so convinced of their goodness that they no longer see their impact. When confronted, they deflect or blame others. They cannot apologize, not truly, because their ego won't allow the thought that they could be wrong. They perform kindness instead of embodying it. They lack spiritual humility. Jung taught that real enlightenment comes not from pretending to be good, but from integrating the parts of ourselves we'd rather deny. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, he wrote, but by making the darkness conscious. Those who skip that step don't evolve, they deceive. They may even lead others, gaining admiration, influence, or followers who mistake perfection for wisdom. But their spiritual teachings will always carry a hidden sharpness, because their shadow seeps into everything they touch. That's how spiritual harm is done, not through obvious evil, but through unconscious righteousness. You can recognize them by how they react to disagreement. The moment you assert a boundary or say no, their mask begins to slip. They don't rage, they withhold. They don't confront, they guilt. They twist your words, make you question your reality, and leave you wondering if you're the problem. You're not. What you're feeling is the shadow they refuse to see in themselves. And no matter how many books they read, prayers they chant, or crystals they hold, if they won't face their own shadow, they will keep projecting it onto others. True spiritual maturity begins with self-honesty. It means admitting when you're triggered, recognizing when you're acting from fear, and taking responsibility for the pain you cause. That is what makes someone trustworthy. not their outer glow, but their inner reckoning. So be careful with those who claim to be pure, but have never been broken. Be wary of those who preach love, but cannot hold space for truth. Because the most dangerous people are not those who fight their demons. They are the ones who pretend they never had any. 4. When challenged, their mask cracks. When a person is challenged and their mask begins to crack, they don't erupt in anger or raise their voice. They retreat into silence, deliver guilt-laced remarks, or become subtly cold and passive-aggressive. This isn't an emotional explosion, it's emotional precision. They make you question your own reality while preserving an image of moral superiority. You find yourself confused, apologizing for things you never did, wondering if you're the one at fault. But you're not. You've simply encountered someone who doesn't confront conflict with honesty, but manipulates it from behind a veil of emotional control. Carl Jung warned us that the most dangerous people are not those who are visibly flawed, but those who deny the existence of their shadow entirely. They live from a persona so polished that it blinds others from seeing the truth that beneath their calm surface lies a soul deeply fragmented, repressing the very darkness that makes them human. And when that darkness is denied, it doesn't disappear. It finds another way to express itself through control, withdrawal, condescension, and emotional gaslighting. These people know exactly how to make you feel unworthy without saying anything directly. Their silence is sharp. Their kindness is conditional. Their presence feels clean on the outside but hollow to the soul. They don't just manipulate behavior, they manipulate belief. They create a version of reality where they're always the stable one, the wise one, the calm in the storm, while you become unstable, overly sensitive, or dramatic. Over time, you start shrinking to fit into their expectations. Your fire dims, your soul aches, and your intuition whispers that something is deeply off, even when there's no proof. And that's the trap. Because there's no overt harm, no loud betrayal, no violent act, just subtle soul erosion, a slow dismantling of your confidence. Carl Jung once said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul." And that's exactly what these individuals do. They refuse to meet their own darkness, so they shape others through denial. What makes them truly dangerous is how spiritual they can appear. They meditate, speak gently, give advice, and appear endlessly composed. But spiritual maturity is not a performance. It is the integration of all parts of the self: the pain, the rage, the shame, the shadow. When someone bypasses their inner work and replaces it with polished behavior, they become spiritually hollow and psychologically manipulative. Their soul may look still, but it's stagnant, not serene. And you'll feel that stagnation in the way they avoid accountability, in the way they use your goodness against you, and in the way they never admit their own flaws. It's not their calm that makes them dangerous. It's what they're hiding beneath it. A soul that has not faced its own shadow becomes a mirror that distorts others, pulling them into a game they never agreed to play. So if you ever feel like your light is dimming in someone's presence while they shine effortlessly, don't question your worth. Question the illusion. Because the most dangerous people are not the ones who lose control, but the ones who never seem to have any shadow at all. Stay connected to our journey of spiritual insight by subscribing to the channel. Here, we uncover the hidden patterns behind emotional manipulation and help you reclaim your inner clarity. Remember, your soul was never meant to live under someone else's control. It was made to shine in truth and freedom. 5. True danger lies in denial, not darkness. True danger doesn't come from people who show you their anger, who admit their jealousy, or who confess their flaws. It comes from those who present themselves as flawless. As Carl Jung warned, the most dangerous people are not those who are openly struggling with their shadow, but those who claim to have none. These individuals deny the darker parts of their psyche, burying their wounds beneath layers of politeness, spirituality, or self-righteous calm. But denial doesn't purify the soul, it poisons it. When a person refuses to face their shadow, that unacknowledged darkness leaks into their behavior in subtle, manipulative ways. It might show up in their need to control others, in passive-aggressive comments masked as concern, in gaslighting disguised as wisdom, or in emotional detachment that punishes others while maintaining a facade of grace. They may never raise their voice, but their silence can scream with judgment. They may never lash out, but they use guilt, shame, or moral superiority to dominate those around them. Carl Jung believed that people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. And in doing so, they become disconnected from empathy, from humility, from the very humanity they pretend to embody. I once watched a woman who was widely admired in her community for being gentle, kind, and spiritual. She volunteered, meditated, quoted scripture, but she never allowed herself to be questioned. If someone disagreed with her, she would retreat with a wounded expression, making others feel like villains for simply being honest. Over time, her relationships crumbled, not because of open conflict, but because of the invisible weight of emotional manipulation. No one could hold her accountable without being made to feel cruel. That is the power of an unchecked shadow. It protects the ego at the expense of connection. And this isn't just about others, it's about you too. If you're constantly trying to appear perfect, to be the good one, the kind one, the calm one, while stuffing down your true feelings, you're not healing, you're hiding. The shadow doesn't disappear through repression. It transforms through awareness. A person who says, "I've been jealous, I've lied, I've hurt people, but I'm working on it," is far safer, far more trustworthy, and far more spiritually awake than someone who claims to never struggle. Because spiritual growth isn't about looking enlightened, it's about being honest with your soul. So the next time you meet someone who seems almost too good to be true, ask yourself if they're in touch with their humanity or performing perfection. And more importantly, ask yourself the same. Are you being real with your feelings, or are you trying to maintain an image that denies your depth? The world doesn't need more perfection. It needs more truth. And as Carl Jung said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. The most powerful and safe people are not those without a shadow, but those who've met their darkness, embraced it, and chosen not to let it control them. The soul does not thrive on denial. It thrives on integration. Wholeness is born not from pretending to be pure, but from having the courage to look within. 6. Trust your intuition. Trust your intuition not just as a feeling, but as a spiritual signal alerting you when something is out of alignment. When you meet someone whose politeness feels too perfect, whose kindness never falters, whose emotional tone never shifts, your body often senses what your mind can't yet explain. That quiet discomfort isn't paranoia. It's the wisdom of your soul, picking up on an invisible imbalance, a disconnect between who someone appears to be and who they truly are underneath. Carl Jung warned that the most dangerous people aren't the ones who openly show their flaws, but the ones who have hidden their darkness so well, even from themselves. He called this hidden part the shadow, the rejected, repressed parts of the self that remain unconscious. And when the shadow is denied, it doesn't disappear, it gains power. People who refuse to meet their own shadow become slaves to it, acting from it without awareness. That's where the real spiritual danger lies. It's not in raw anger or open conflict. It's in the cold calm of someone who seems emotionally flawless but lacks any genuine depth. It's the spiritual detachment that looks like peace but feels like manipulation. They have spiritual language but no soul behind their words. They wear compassion like a costume, but it's not rooted in empathy. It's rooted in control. They don't yell, they don't rage, but they make you feel guilty, confused, or inferior in subtle, silent ways. They are charming, agreeable, and always smiling, yet being around them leaves you drained, uneasy, or full of self-doubt. The truth is, no one is without darkness, and pretending to be spiritually above it makes someone far more dangerous than the one who humbly admits their flaws. The ones who have wrestled with their own inner demons tend to carry a gentleness, an authenticity, a kind of soulful gravity that makes you feel safe. They aren't afraid of their humanity, and because of that, they don't need to project a false image. Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." People who have not done this work often become tools of their own repressed shadow, hurting others with a smile, justifying harm with spiritual words, masking control as kindness. And in today's world, where appearances dominate and spiritual bypassing is common, it's more important than ever to tune in to the quiet wisdom of your nervous system. The body feels what the soul detects. So when your chest tightens, when something feels off with someone who seems too perfect, don't dismiss it. That's not anxiety. That's intuition. That's your spiritual compass trying to protect you. In a world full of performance, performance without presence is a red flag. Look beyond the mask. Ask yourself, is this kindness rooted in heart or in image? Real spiritual presence carries warmth, depth, humility, and truth. What's dangerous isn't darkness. It's pretending it doesn't exist. Do you feel it too? If you trust your inner knowledge, type it loud in the comments. I trust my intuition. It never lies. 7. The path to protection is inner awareness. The most dangerous people are not the ones who raise their voice or lose their temper. They are the ones who seem perfect. Calm, polite, agreeable, and always composed. Yet something in your soul warns you to stay alert. Carl Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely, because the moment a man rejects his darker instincts is the moment those instincts begin to control him from the shadows." The person who denies his flaws, who refuses to confront the parts of himself that are selfish, jealous, angry, or insecure, becomes a prisoner of those very forces. And instead of owning them, he begins to project them onto others silently, skillfully, and often dangerously. He may call others controlling, when, deep down, he fears his own lack of power. He may accuse others of dishonesty while wearing a carefully constructed mask. This is the danger of spiritual blindness, not the kind that doesn't believe in truth, but the kind that believes the lie of perfection. The path to true protection is inner awareness. You don't need to become bitter, paranoid, or jaded. You simply need to become whole. And wholeness means facing your own shadow, your hidden fears, your unspoken desires, your childhood wounds, your resentment, your pride. When you do that, something shifts. You become immune to manipulation because you've already confronted the manipulator within. You're no longer seduced by surface-level charm or intimidated by calm arrogance. You sense what others miss: the dissonance between words and energy, the emotional stiffness that signals suppression, the too smooth tone of someone afraid to feel real pain. When you do your soul work, your discernment sharpens. You begin to feel it lies in your nervous system. You begin to trust your intuition over appearances. You begin to walk with a quiet power that cannot be fooled. In a culture that worships image, many men are taught to avoid vulnerability and avoid conflict by staying nice. But repression is not virtue. It's danger in disguise. A man who has never made peace with his anger is often the one who hurts others the most subtly, because his anger leaks through in disguised forms: coldness, guilt-tripping, passive control. The danger is not in flaws, it's in the denial of flaws. That is why Jung emphasized shadow integration as a spiritual necessity. It is not enough to be good. You must be real. You must face the parts of your soul you'd rather avoid so they no longer control you from the dark. When you do, your presence becomes honest, your boundaries become clean, and your relationships become rooted in truth, not illusion. And in that state, you become unshakable, because you no longer fear what's within you or what's hiding in others. That is not just psychological strength, it is spiritual sovereignty. To affirm your commitment to inner awareness and true protection, comment below, "I choose wholeness." Let this be your declaration that you are no longer fooled by masks, only aligned with truth. Thank you for watching this powerful reflection on Carl Jung's insight into human nature. Sometimes, the greatest danger lies not in what is seen, but in what is hidden. If this message gave you a new perspective or stirred something within, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Be sure to like this video, subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our upcoming content that helps you live with greater awareness and depth. Stay wise. Stay awake. Carl Jung. Why empaths attract people who secretly resent their light. Carl Jung. The brighter the light, the darker the shadow. Carl Jung. Have you ever wondered why your kindness, sensitivity, and open heart seem to attract not only admiration, but also envy, misunderstanding, or even quiet resentment? You're not alone, and you're not imagining it. In this video from Spiritual Wisdom, we explore the deep psychological truth behind why empaths often draw in those who secretly feel threatened by their light. Carl Jung believed that the unconscious shapes more of our relationships than we realize, and the tension between empathy and shadow is more than personal, it's archetypal. As you listen, Consider how this insight plays out in your own life. Can you recall a time when your presence changed a room? Leave a comment and share your experience. Your story might be the mirror someone else needs today. Let's begin this journey inward together. 1. Empaths mirror the shadow of others. Have you ever noticed how being genuine and open-hearted can sometimes bring out the worst in others? It's a paradox that many spiritually awakened men face, especially those who identify as empaths. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." This isn't just philosophical, it's deeply practical, especially in a world that teaches men to be stoic, guarded, and emotionally numb. The truth is, when you're an empath, a man who feels deeply, who listens without judgment, who walks through life with a spiritual awareness and a tender strength, you're not just existing. You're reflecting. You're a mirror to the people around you, and what they see in that mirror can be both illuminating and terrifying. Empaths, by nature, don't just walk into a room. They shift the energy of it. Their presence, authentic, vulnerable, unfiltered, brings forth a kind of emotional contrast that forces others to confront what they've buried deep within. You may have noticed how your kindness unsettles people who are used to emotional distance, or how your calm presence disrupts those addicted to chaos. That's not a weakness. That's spiritual power. And yet, this same gift can become a source of quiet resentment from those who aren't ready to face their own shadow. When someone sees you standing comfortably in your light, owning your truth without the masks, they might feel threatened, not because you've done anything wrong, but because your existence challenges the false identities they've built. This dynamic isn't always conscious. That's why it's so dangerous. People may not even know why they pull away, criticize you behind your back, or try to make you question your worth. But at the root of it lies the simple fact: your spiritual light exposes their spiritual denial. Let's take this into modern life. Say you're at work, showing up consistently, not competing, but collaborating, offering empathy in meetings instead of domination. You're probably the guy people go to when they need clarity or calm. But have you ever noticed how certain colleagues, often the ones posturing the most confidence, seem to undermine or dismiss you without cause? Or maybe in relationships, you've been with women who said they wanted depth, only to later withdraw when your vulnerability got too real. That's not a sign you're broken. It's proof you're walking the path of a spiritual awakening. You've become a mirror that others don't always want to look into, because your emotional truth challenges their emotional avoidance. Jung would call this the shadow of the repressed parts of the psyche. And when your light touches someone else's shadow, it doesn't always bring gratitude. Sometimes it awakens resistance, envy, and projection. So what can you do? First, realize that this dynamic is not personal, but psychological and spiritual. Your job is not to shrink so that others can feel comfortable in their illusions. Your job is to continue to walk in integrity. Continue to demonstrate emotional intelligence. Continue to nurture your spiritual growth. The world needs more men who are willing to be whole, not just strong, but also tender. Not just providers, but guardians of presence and peace. And if you ever feel lonely because of your light, remember, stars are always lonelier when they are at the top of the sky. That doesn't mean they are lost. It means they are leading, So ask yourself, are you willing to continue to shine, even when others silently resent that shine? Because the men who choose to evolve, awaken, and live spiritually connected are the ones who will quietly change things. Comment below, I choose to change things. 2. The light of the empath both attracts and threatens. There's something both beautiful and burdensome about being an empath. You carry a kind of spiritual light, an authentic warmth, a deep understanding, a presence that soothes and heals. And that energy, it doesn't just go unnoticed. It's magnetic. People feel it even before you speak. It draws in the broken, the searching, the curious. But here's the paradox. While your light attracts, it also threatens. Not everyone who walks toward your radiance comes with love. Some are drawn in by something they don't even understand themselves. They feel the pull, but once they get too close, something within them starts to shift. Insecurities bubble up. Wounds they've buried begin to ache. And suddenly, your light isn't a gift, it's a mirror. And in that mirror, they don't like what they see. Carl Jung once said, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. When they stand in the presence of someone deeply tuned into their own soul, someone walking a path of spiritual growth and authenticity, they're forced to confront the parts of themselves they've long ignored. You might be wondering why this keeps happening in your life. Why do you, someone who leads with kindness and seeks connection, so often find yourself entangled with those who subtly compete, criticize, or resent you? The answer lies in the light you carry. Your light doesn't just reveal truth in others, it amplifies it. And when someone isn't ready to face that truth, they project their discomfort onto you. Think of a friend who once celebrated your wins until your growth surpassed their comfort zone. Suddenly, the compliments stopped, the support faded, and passive-aggressive comments took their place. Their love for you never left, it just got buried beneath their own unresolved pain. In spiritual terms, your light disturbed their shadow. This isn't your fault. It's a spiritual pattern, and it plays out over and over again in the lives of empaths who walk with depth and clarity. Let me tell you a quick story. There was a man in his 40s named James, a soft-spoken teacher with a remarkable gift for sensing people's emotions. Colleagues and students loved him until he was promoted to a leadership role. That's when it started. The subtle coldness, the jokes at his expense, the questioning of his competence. You see, James never changed. What changed was how others felt when their own insecurities were reflected back to them by someone who wasn't pretending, who wasn't playing the game. His presence reminded them of how far they'd drifted from their own truth. James's story is not unique. If you're listening to this, chances are you've lived a version of it too. And it's not because you're flawed, it's because you're aligned. So here's the real question. How do you protect your spiritual light without dimming it? How do you keep giving without being drained by those who don't understand your gift? Have you ever felt the need to shrink, to downplay your joy or wisdom just to keep the peace? That's not spiritual humility, that's spiritual suppression. And it's time to stop doing that. You were never meant to be everyone's comfort zone. You were meant to be a catalyst. And sometimes, catalysts are misunderstood. But the lesson here is not to retreat into isolation. It's to develop discernment. Learn to recognize the difference between those who are drawn to your light because they seek healing, and those who are drawn because they crave what they haven't yet cultivated in themselves. Surround yourself with people who don't just see your light, but respect it, who reflects it. That's the space where true spiritual growth thrives. Ultimately, your gift of empathy is not a burden to be carried in silence, but a spiritual responsibility. You were born with the ability to feel deeply, and that is not weakness. It is strength. Yes, your light may be confusing to some, but never let that convince you that it should be hidden. The world does not need you to be smaller. It needs you whole. Let your spiritual presence remind people of what is possible when one chooses authenticity over approval. Because true spirituality is not about dimming your light to make others comfortable, but about shining in a way that calls them to rise. Comment below, I choose to shine. 3. Resentment is not personal, it's archetypal. When you, as an empath, encounter resentment from others, it's easy to take it personally after all. You've done nothing but show kindness, offer presence, and lead with your heart. But what if I told you that this resentment has little to do with you as an individual, and everything to do with something far deeper, something archetypal? Carl Jung, the father of analytical psychology, said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." This truth lies at the heart of why empaths often attract people who secretly or even unknowingly resent their light. You see, your light doesn't just illuminate the room, it also exposes the shadows. And those shadows aren't always ready to be seen. The resentment you experience is not a rejection of your essence, but a reaction from those who have not yet made peace with their own. When someone has repressed their pain, buried their truth, or denied their spiritual self for too long, encountering someone who is authentic, emotionally open, and spiritually awake can feel like a threat. It activates old wounds, stirs unhealed archetypes like the wounded inner child or the rejected self, and brings the unconscious discomfort bubbling to the surface. This is not about ego or character flaws, it's about spiritual wisdom. The empath becomes a mirror, unintentionally reflecting back everything the other person has tried to hide. And when a person is not ready to meet themselves, they may lash out at the very soul who helped them see. In that sense, their resentment is more about their inner struggle than it is about your light. So, ask yourself this: have you ever noticed how some people pull away from you just as you begin to show them real compassion or insight? Why is it that your spiritual presence feels like too much for those still hiding from their own truth? Carl Jung taught us that the relationship between the self and the shadow is not a flaw. It's a foundational structure of the psyche. When that structure is out of balance, your light doesn't just shine, it disrupts. And disruption, even when divine, can be uncomfortable. Empaths, by simply being who they are, awaken parts of others that are not yet healed. This is why the resentment you feel is not truly about you. It's about the inner conflict your presence reveals. The next time you find yourself facing silent envy, unexplained coldness, or subtle sabotage, don't shrink or start questioning your worth. Recognize it for what it is: the spiritual tension between light and shadow. And let that awareness ground you, not break you. In truth, your energy is not just powerful, it's transformational. But not everyone is ready to transform. Some will resist, some will retreat, and some will resent. That is not your burden to carry. Your role as a bringer of light is not to convince or convert, but to be. Continue your path of spiritual awakening with courage and compassion, knowing that your light might be misunderstood, but it is never wasted. So what does this mean for you today? Perhaps it's time to stop apologizing for the brightness of your soul. Perhaps it's time to stop shrinking around those who fear their own growth. Can you honor your light even when it makes others uncomfortable? Can you stand tall in your authenticity even when it activates someone else's shadows? These are not just personal questions, they're spiritual invitations. And in accepting them, you deepen your journey into spiritual wisdom, self-respect, and the freedom to be wholly you. If this resonates with you, consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell. Your journey to stoic self-mastery and victory continues with each lesson. 4. Empaths often carry the wounded healer archetype. There's something profoundly misunderstood about empaths, especially men who walk through the world carrying a quiet sensitivity that others mistake for weakness. Carl Jung once said, "Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakens." And that truth becomes glaringly clear when we explore the archetype of the wounded healer. Many empaths, perhaps including you, have endured emotional battles that left deep scars, childhood neglect, betrayal in relationships, or being shamed for feeling too much. But instead of becoming bitter, these men alchemize that pain into wisdom, developing a powerful sense of compassion that becomes their greatest strength. This is not just a personality trait. It is a spiritual gift born from survival, insight, and the courage to feel what others suppress. The wounded healer archetype, deeply rooted in both Jungian psychology and spiritual traditions, describes a person who heals others through the very pain they've once had to survive. But here's the paradox. That light you carry, the warmth, the empathy, the willingness to see the pain in others, often triggers something uncomfortable in people who have spent their lives running from their own shadows. Rather than feeling grateful for your presence, they begin to project their unresolved wounds onto you, dumping their emotional baggage or even resenting you without understanding why. This isn't about you being too sensitive. It's about them being too disconnected. And in modern life, especially for men expected to conform to stoicism without emotional depth, your light exposes what they've tried to bury. In spiritual awakening, this dynamic is more than psychological. It's energetic. You become a mirror, unintentionally forcing others to confront their unhealed selves. That's why empaths are often silently attacked, misunderstood, or manipulated by people who are drawn to their light but simultaneously threatened by it. You may notice this in the workplace, in relationships, even in friendships, where you're constantly the one listening, giving, supporting, yet left drained or guilt-tripped. The advice here isn't to stop being who you are. It's to become more aware of the sacred nature of your emotional intelligence. Protect your energy. Learn to discern between those who are genuinely receptive and those who seek you out as an emotional crutch. You don't need to carry every broken soul on your back. Spiritual growth means setting boundaries as an act of self-respect, not cruelty. As you awaken further, you will realize that being a healer does not mean being a martyr. Your journey is not about fixing others, but about standing in your own authenticity. radiating a solid spiritual presence, transforming without losing yourself in the process. So let me ask you this. When was the last time you honored your own healing as much as you do others? Listen, because the world needs more men who can feel deeply and still lead powerfully. That is your gift. That is your light. And that, my friend, is your responsibility. Comment below. I accept this wonderful gift. 5. Unhealed beliefs make empaths vulnerable. Have you ever asked yourself why, despite your kind heart and spiritual awareness, some people seem drawn to you only to later act cold, resentful, or even draining? If so, you're not alone. One of the biggest reasons empaths attract people who secretly resent their light is rooted in an unhealed belief many carry deep inside. The unconscious idea that their worth is tied to healing or fixing others. This belief, often formed in childhood through emotionally unstable or inconsistent environments, teaches the empath that love must be earned through self-sacrifice. And so, without even realizing it, they begin to equate being loved with being needed. But here's the trap. When your self-worth depends on being a savior, you unconsciously tolerate emotional exhaustion, ignore red flags, and overextend your energy trying to rescue people who may not want to be saved. This is not spirituality. It's spiritual bypassing masked as virtue. The desire to help others becomes a silent contract. If I heal you, maybe you'll love me. But in reality, what often happens is that those who receive this care begin to resent it, not because the empath did anything wrong, but because their very presence exposes what the other has been avoiding within themselves. Let me tell you a story. There was a woman in her 40s who had spent her entire adult life giving emotionally, financially, spiritually to every man she dated. She believed that if she just gave more, stayed longer, loved harder, she would finally be loved the way she yearned for. But instead of receiving love, she received emotional distance, manipulation, and subtle contempt. One day, during a therapy session, she broke down and said, "I don't understand why people either adore me or secretly hate me." And her therapist gently replied, "Because your light is a mirror, and not everyone is ready to see what's being reflected." That moment was the beginning of her spiritual growth. She realized that healing others could no longer come at the cost of abandoning herself. She didn't need to earn love, she needed to embody it. So let me ask you, are there places in your life where helping others has become a way to avoid helping yourself? Do you ever feel like you're betraying your own needs just to be accepted or stay connected? These are not small questions. They are invitations to look deeper into your patterns and to reclaim your energy from relationships that feed on your empathy without honoring your humanity. Because true spirituality is not about martyrdom, it's about alignment. And spiritual growth means learning to love without losing yourself. It means setting boundaries without guilt. It means realizing that your light doesn't have to be dimmed to make others feel safe. If you take one thing away from this, let it be this. You are not here to bleed for the world in order to prove your worth. You are here to shine so fully that your presence alone is healing, whether or not others choose to receive it. The lesson is simple, yet profound. Your value does not lie in how much you carry for others. It lies in how fully you carry yourself. Now ask yourself, What would change in your life if you truly believed that? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear how this has shaped your journey. 6. Boundaries are essential for survival. In a world that often mistakes kindness for weakness, it is crucial for empaths to understand that spiritual wisdom is not about endlessly giving until you are empty. It's about knowing when to say no to preserve your inner light. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But becoming who you truly are requires discernment, and that includes setting boundaries that are not made of stone, but of self-respect. You see, if you are an empath, your gift is your ability to feel deeply, to sense what others miss, to intuitively understand emotional undercurrents, but without clear energetic boundaries. This gift can quickly become your greatest vulnerability. Have you ever left a conversation feeling completely exhausted, like your soul had been siphoned? That's not random. It's because your energetic field is so open that others unconsciously pour their unprocessed emotions into your space. And here's the spiritual truth. When you don't know where you end and someone else begins, you start living their pain as if it were your own, abandoning your own needs in the process. Carl Jung's teachings remind us that the unconscious seeks expression, and if not given space, it will manifest in the form of projection. That means others may project their wounds onto you because your light reflects the parts of themselves they haven't yet faced. And without boundaries, you absorb those projections like a sponge. But boundaries are not selfish. They are self-honoring. Think of them as spiritual filters that let in love, but keep out chaos. You don't need to shut the world out. You just need to stop bleeding for people who would never offer you a bandage. So ask yourself this: where in your life are you overextending, giving too much, or allowing guilt to override your intuition? When did you last pause to ask if someone else's emergency was really your responsibility? This is where spiritual wisdom becomes survival. It's not about building walls to isolate, but about building clarity to protect. Boundaries allow you to love from a place of wholeness, not depletion. And as you grow in spiritual awareness, you begin to realize that the more you honor your energy, the less you attract those who seek to exploit it. Isn't it time to stop apologizing for needing space, peace, and protection? After all, you weren't created to be a container for unresolved trauma. You were created to be a lighthouse, not a lifeboat. And a lighthouse shines not by rushing to every drowning soul, but by standing firm and steady, even in the midst of storms. The lesson here is simple but profound. Your light is sacred, and if you want to keep it, you must learn to protect it. Comment below: "My light is sacred." 7. Resentment often reflects unconscious envy. There's a powerful quote by Carl Jung that says, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." And nowhere is this more true than in the quiet war waged against empaths, those who live from their heart, embody truth, and dare to be emotionally honest in a world that rewards armor over authenticity. Men, especially those of you who've walked through life with depth and integrity, have likely noticed this pattern. The more grounded and emotionally clear you become, the more resistance you attract, not from overt enemies, but from people who silently resent your light. This resentment, though often hidden behind sarcasm, avoidance, or passive aggression is rarely about you. It's a reflection of an inner war waging inside them. The truth is, resentment often masks unconscious envy. When someone sees in you a kind of emotional freedom or spiritual clarity they haven't yet earned or have long abandoned, they don't know whether to admire you or tear you down. They won't say, "Teach me," or "How did you learn to be so calm in chaos?" Instead, they mock your peace, question your motives, or distance themselves, not realizing that their reaction is a mirror of their own unhealed story. And that is where spiritual awakening begins, not in escape, but in awareness. In the presence of an empath, others are often forced to confront the masks they wear. Your light exposes what they've buried. And in a society where masculinity is often defined by dominance rather than depth, a man who shows emotional availability can be deeply unsettling to those who still live behind walls. Now let's make this real. You've probably had a moment when your simple kindness was misinterpreted. You offered support without asking for anything in return, and yet someone accused you of being manipulative or having a hidden agenda. That wasn't about you. That was their projection. As Carl Jung taught, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. People project their hidden insecurities onto those who awaken their dormant potential. And for many, an empath feels like a spotlight on their shame, their apathy, their denial. It's easier for them to call you too sensitive than to admit they've forgotten how to feel. So what do you do with this awareness? First, you stop shrinking. You stop apologizing for your spiritual strength or watering down your compassion to make others comfortable. You continue your own spiritual awakening, not to prove anything, but to stay aligned with your core truth. And second, you let their resentment teach you something too, not about your flaws, but about their unmet longing. You're not here to heal everyone. You're here to embody wholeness so that those ready for their own awakening can find the courage to begin. And here's a question worth reflecting on. When someone resents your light, is it your responsibility to dim it, or their responsibility to deal with their shadow? The answer determines whether you continue to live in fear of your own light or step boldly into the role life is calling you to. And if you're hearing this right now, it's probably because your path is about more than just survival. It includes healing, guidance, and being steadfast in your spiritual presence. Because true power doesn't come naturally. And the more you commit to living fully as yourself, the more you realize that not everyone is ready to receive your light. But that doesn't mean you have to hide it. Just shine. The right people will show up to meet you. Comment below. I live committed to myself. 8. The path of the empath is to shine anyway. There comes a point in every empath's journey where they must decide whether to dim their light to make others comfortable or to stand tall in their authenticity and shine anyway. If you've ever felt like your presence stirs something in people, something unspoken, maybe even uncomfortable, you're not imagining it. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And for the empath, that journey is deeply spiritual. You're not just someone who feels deeply, you're someone whose very being becomes a mirror, a light, a spiritual force that reflects both the beauty and the unresolved wounds in others. And that light, as warm and healing as it is, can also be confronting. It can awaken parts in others that they have long buried, and that awakening doesn't always feel like gratitude. It often comes out as judgment, resentment, or distance. But here's what I want you to hear. That reaction has nothing to do with your worth. It's not a signal to shrink. It's a sign that your light is working. Let me tell you a story that might help this land for you. There was a man in his early 40s, a kind soul who had always gone out of his way to be gentle, encouraging, and open-hearted. He had this quiet strength, a presence that made people feel safe. But oddly enough, every time he entered a new workspace or group, he'd start to notice subtle shifts, co-workers pulling away, eye rolls behind his back, leaders who felt oddly threatened. He couldn't figure it out until someone close told him, "Your peace disrupts people who are used to chaos." And just like that, it clicked. His spiritual growth wasn't just for himself, it was affecting the room. His light was a reminder of what others weren't ready to face. Does that sound familiar to you? Have you ever noticed people acting cold or distant the moment you start to speak from a deeper place? What if their discomfort is actually a measure of how powerful your presence is, not a sign that you're doing anything wrong, but that your light is doing exactly what it's meant to do? See, spirituality isn't just about feeling peaceful. It's about growing into the kind of truth that makes hiding impossible. When you commit to spiritual growth, you start radiating authenticity, and that light makes people confront their own masks. Some will be inspired, others will retreat, but none of that should make you turn your light down. In fact, the path of the empath is to shine anyway, to walk with both humility and courage, knowing that your light is a gift, not a burden. You are not here to carry everyone's reaction. You are here to be a lighthouse, not a lifeboat. As you continue to evolve, your light becomes more than just comforting. It becomes catalytic. And in a world that's spiritually asleep, catalysts are often misunderstood first and only appreciated later. So here's the truth. Even when it's hard, even when people pull away, your role is to stand firm in your energy. Let your light be what it is, and trust that you're not alone. There is sacred strength in being who you are, even when it's inconvenient for others. So let me ask you this. Are you willing to keep shining even when it makes others uncomfortable? Are you willing to be the mirror that awakens rather than the mask that pleases? If you take anything from this, let it be this truth. Your spiritual growth is not just about healing. It's about embodying a frequency that challenges, that uplifts, and that dares to be seen. Don't shrink. You were never meant to. Keep going, keep growing, and keep choosing the light, even if you have to walk through the shadows to protect it. What part of this message resonates with you the most? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear how this has shaped your journey. As we've explored today, empaths often attract hidden resentment, not because of weakness, but because their light stirs what others have yet to heal. Your compassion, presence, and authenticity can unintentionally trigger discomfort in those who have forgotten their own light, but that's not your burden to carry. Instead of shrinking, choose to stand tall in your truth. Let this be your daily practice, to honor your energy, trust your intuition, and walk with grace even when misunderstood. If this message resonated with you, I invite you to share your experience in the comments. Have you ever felt resented simply for being yourself? Let's continue this powerful conversation together. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us here at Spiritual Wisdom, where your light is always seen and celebrated.